in Hebrew in Egypt, that transition point. Now we're going into Genesis chapter 37, where it talks about Joseph's dreams. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born old, and he had made an ornate robe for him. Come on, there we go. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brother, we were bothered, kept the matter in mind. Joseph sold by his brothers. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks near Shechem. And Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. Come, I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. So he said to him, "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off from the valley of Hebron. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Here comes that dreamer," they said to each other. "Come now, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns and say that ferocious animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." When Reuben heard this, he tried to rescue him from their hands. Let's not take his life. He said, "Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father. So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the ornate robe he was wearing, and they took him and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty. There was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm, and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So when the Midianite merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. If you guys have any questions, put them in the comments below, specifically questions pertaining to Christianity, the Bible, and I'll be sure to answer them. Of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. When Reuben returned to hit the cistern and saw that Joseph was not there, he tore his clothes. He went back to his brothers and said, "The boy isn't there. Where can I turn now?" Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered a goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the ornate robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it to see whether it is in your son's robe." He recognized it and said, "It is my son's robe. Some ferocious animal has devoured him. Joseph has surely been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. No. 8 then starts with the story of Judah and Tamar. Or is it Genesis 12:1? We already read that one. Thank you for the heart, Chris. Eventually, Egypt fell under the control of these outsiders, a Semitic people known as the Hyksos, named foreign chiefs. How you doing, Sharky? Although much despised by the native Egyptians, the Hyksos maintained their control from about 1648 to 1540 BC, even expanding Egypt's control north into Palestine, which became an Egyptian province. Judah got a wife from his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death. Then Judah said to Onan, "Sleep with your brother's wife and fulfill your duty to her as brother-in-law to raise up offspring for your brother." But Onan knew that the child would not be his, so whenever he slept with his brother's wife, he spilled the semen on the ground to keep from providing offspring for his brother. What he did was wicked in the Lord's sight, so the Lord put him to death also. Now, this is a clear forbiddance of masturbation in any way, because to spill your seed in a way that it shouldn't be done is against God's order. And when you do something against God's order, that's severe rebellion. Judah then said to his daughter-in-law Tamar, "Live as a widow in your father's household until my son Shelah grows up," for he thought he might die too, just like his brothers. So Tamar went to live in her father's household. After a long time, Judah's wife, the daughter of Shua, died. When Judah had recovered from his grief, he went up to Timnah, to the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira, the Adullamite, went with him. How you doing, Angela? To the men who were shearing his sheep, and his friend Hira, the Adullamite, went with him. When Tamar was told, "Your father-in-law is on his way to Timnah to shear his sheep," she shook off her widow's clothes, covered herself with a veil to disguise herself, and then sat down at the entrance to Enaim, which is on the road to Timnah. For she saw that though Shelah had now grown up, she had not been given to him as his wife. When Judah saw her, he thought she was a prostitute, for she had covered her face. Not realizing that she was his daughter-in-law, he went over to her by the roadside and said, "Come now, let me sleep with you." "And what will you give me to sleep with you?" she asked. "I'll send you a young goat from my flock," he said. "Will you give me something as a pledge until you send it?" she asked. He said, "What pledge should I give you?" "Your seal and its cord and the staff in your hand," she answered. So he gave them to her and slept with her, and she became pregnant by him after she left. So currently, this is chapter 39 of Genesis. After she left, she took off her veil and put on her widow's clothes again. Meanwhile, Judah sent the young goat by his friend, the Adullamite, in order to get his pledge back from the woman. But he did not find her. He asked the men who lived there, "Where is the shrine prostitute who was beside the road at Enaim?" "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here," they said. So he went back to Judah and said, "I didn't find her." Besides, the men who lived there said, "There hasn't been any shrine prostitute here." Then Judah said, "Let her keep what she has, or we will become a laughingstock. After all, I did send her this young goat, but you didn't find her." About 3 months later, Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law Tamar is guilty of prostitution, and as a result, she is now pregnant." Judah said, "Bring her out and have her burned to death." As she was being brought out, she sent a message to her father-in-law. "I am pregnant by the man who owns these," she said, and she added, "See if you recognize whose seal and cord and staff these are." Judah recognized them and said, "She is more righteous than I, since I wouldn't give her to my son Shelah." And he did not sleep with her. When the time came for her to give birth, there were twin boys in her womb. As she was giving birth, one of them put out his hand. So the midwife took a scarlet thread and tied it on his wrist, and said, "This one came out first." But when he drew back his hand, his brother came out, and she said, "So this is how you have broken out." And he was named Perez. Then his brother, who had the scarlet thread on his wrist, came out, and he was named Zerah. Now it has a little commentary on the beliefs and ideas of the time. The connection is bad for some reason. Let me try a different Wi-Fi. Ishbi Erah. So the Isin dynasty was founded. In 2004 BC, the city of Ur fell to the Elamites. In circa 1804 BC, King Rimsin of Larsa defeated Isin. 1792 to 1750 BC, the Hammurabi is the sixth king of the first dynasty of Babylon. At circa 1781 BC, Hammurabi defeats Isin. And in circa 1763 BC, Hammurabi defeats the king Rimsin of Larsa. And then lastly, in 1760 BC, Hammurabi defeated the king Zimri Lim of Mari. So if we continue, Genesis 39 then opens with Joseph and Potiphar's wife. This was when Joseph was accused of sexual assault. It says this, "Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt. Potiphar, an Egyptian who was one of Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him there." Now it gives a little commentary based on Genesis 39, 1 and 2, which we just read. Joseph goes to Egypt. After arriving in Egypt, Joseph became a slave of the Egyptian officer Potiphar in Genesis 39, verse 1. But this slave's fortunes changed dramatically. Joseph's rise to power saw him become first the attendant of Potiphar, put in charge of his household in Genesis 39, verse 4, but eventually a ruler over all of Egypt, second in power to the Egyptian Pharaoh himself in Genesis 41, 39 through 43. One possible setting for the Joseph story is the period when the Hyksos people ruled Egypt. Before the Hyksos arrived, Egypt had been a unified country. Under the 12th dynasty, 1963 to 1786 BC, Egypt enjoyed a flourishing mining industry and agricultural program, as well as a new capital established near Memphis by Pharaoh Amenhotep I. Another pharaoh, Sesostris III, was able to organize a strong central government for Egypt by controlling the families who ruled Egypt's territories. Sometime after the 12th dynasty, the country began to fragment. Various rulers set up their own dynasties over portions of Egypt and ruled at the same time. The 13th dynasty, which was from 1786 to 1633 BC, established a new capital at Thebes, while the 14th dynasty, 1786 to 1602 BC, consisted of several rulers in the Delta who proclaimed themselves as kings. The political upheaval made Egypt ripe for the invasion of the Hyksos people, who subjugated the country and placed their own capital at Avaris in the Delta region. The Hyksos dynasty lasted more than a century, from 1648 to 1540 BC. The ethnic background of the Hyksos is one reason for setting the Joseph story during this period. These invaders are a mixture of Semitic and Asiatic peoples, and in Egypt ruled by such foreigners, it is possible that someone like Joseph, himself being Semitic and foreign, could rise from a servant to a position of high office. So then Joseph goes to Egypt. Joseph searched for his brothers, eventually finding them at Dothan. His brothers sold him to a caravan of Midianites passing by it en route from Gilead to Egypt. Now this is a little map of the situation. You see all this. You see the Dead Sea, Gilead, Sea of Shinnereth. You see Dothan, Shechem, Bethel, Hebron, and Gaza. And then you see it a little to Egypt here. All these arrows show the route that they took. So they went from Negev, more specifically I forgot the name of it. The smaller city, still part of Negev, but the suburb, there we go, the suburb of Negev, Hebron. They went through there to Bethel, through Shechem, through Dothan, all the way down to Gaza and into Egypt. And that's the path they took. Sorry for the stumbling over my words. It's hard for me to think sometimes. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered. So this is going back to the scripture. This is verse 2 of Genesis 39. The Lord was with Joseph so that he prospered, and he lived in the house of his Egyptian master. When his master saw that the Lord was with him and that the Lord gave him success in everything he did, Joseph found favor in his eyes and became his attendant. Potiphar put him in charge of his household, and he entrusted to his care everything he owned. From the time he put him in charge of his household and of all that he owned, the Lord blessed the household of the Egyptian because of Joseph. The blessing of the Lord was on everything Potiphar had, both in the house and in the field. So Potiphar left everything he had in Joseph's care, with Joseph in charge. He did not concern himself with anything except the food he ate. Now Joseph was well built and handsome, and after a while his master's wife took notice of Joseph and said, "Come to bed with me." So Joseph actually rejects this, but it is Potiphar's wife that makes moves and tries to seduce Joseph and tries to commit adultery with Joseph. So here it has another little commentary where it says the tale of two brothers. This is based off of Genesis 39, 7 through 18. We just read verse 7. After this, we'll be reading 8 and on. Joseph's troubles with Potiphar's wife. Genesis 39, 7 through 18, have a literary parallel in a folk tale from Egypt's New Kingdom, circa 1550 to 1069 BC. At best, the similarities between the tale of two brothers and the Joseph story are superficial and confined to a few details. Nevertheless, both stories share a common plot. The main characters in the tale of two brothers are gods. Anubis asks his younger brother Beta to help him with the yearly sowing. While back home fetching grain, Beta is approached by Anubis's wife, who desires sexual relations with him. Like Joseph, Beta is appalled by the offer and leaves in haste. The wife makes it look as if she has been assaulted by Beta. Readers of the second millennium were familiar with this plot. An innocent servant or shepherd receives a sexual invitation from his seductive wife. His innocency triumphs by his refusal to participate, at which point he incurs the anger and false accusations of the wife. Though innocent, he must flee. Now, continuing on in the scripture in verse 8, but he refused with me in charge. He told her, my master does not concern himself with anything in the house. Everything he owns he has entrusted to my care. No one is greater in this house than I am. My master has withheld nothing from me except you, because you are his wife. How then could I do such a wicked thing and sin against God? And though she spoke to Joseph day after day, he refused to go to bed with her or even be with her. One day he went into the house to attend to his duties, and none of the household servants was inside. She caught him by his cloak and said, come to bed with me. But he left his cloak in her hand and ran out of the house. When she saw that he had left his cloak in her hand and had run out of the house, she called her household servants. Look, she said to them, this Hebrew has been brought up to us to make sport of us. He came in here to sleep with me, but I screamed. When he heard me scream for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. So clearly she lied about him. She kept his cloak beside her until his master came home. Then she told him the story. That Hebrew slave you brought us came to me to make sport of me. But as soon as I screamed for help, he left his cloak beside me and ran out of the house. When his master heard the story, his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me. He burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in the prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care, because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. Genesis 40 then goes into the story of the cupbearer and the baker. They both had dreams, and Joseph, through the power of God, interpreted them properly. It says this, sometime later the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt offended their master, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh was angry with his two officials, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the same prison where Joseph was confined. The captain of the guard assigned them to Joseph, and he attended them. After they had been in custody for some time, each of the two men, the cupbearer and the baker of the king of Egypt, who were being held in prison, had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. But before we continue in there, the Chronological Study Bible here has another time capsule between the years 1800 to 1779 BC. In this, we see in 1800 BC the first wheel-thrown pottery in Greece. Then in 1792, we see Hammurabi ascending the throne of Babylon. In 1790, we see the first code of laws issued by Hammurabi, and Sumerian king list traces the history of Sumer and Akkad from the flood to Hammurabi. In 1786 to 1633, we find the 13th dynasty of Egypt being established as the capital at Thebes. And in 1786 to 1602, the 13th dynasty of Egypt establishes its capital at Thebes. In 1786 to 1602, the 14th dynasty of Egypt consists of local kings in the West Delta. And in 1781, Hammurabi defeats Asin. And lastly, in 1779, the earliest evidences for a wheel with spokes from Syria were found. Now, going back to the scripture, Genesis 40, verse 6. When Joseph came to them the next morning, he saw that they were dejected. So he asked Pharaoh's officials who were in custody with him in his master's house, why do you look so sad today? We both had dreams, they answered, but there is no one to interpret them. Then Joseph said to them, Do not interpretations belong to God? Tell me your dreams. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dreams. He said to him, In my dream, I saw a vine in front of me, and on the vine were 3 branches. As soon as it budded, it blossomed, and its clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes, squeezed them into Pharaoh's cup, and put the cup in his hand. This is what it means, Joseph said to him. The 3 branches are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your position, and you will put Pharaoh's cup in his hand, just as you used to do when you were his cupbearer. But when all goes well with you, remember me and show me kindness. Mention me to Pharaoh and get me out of this prison. I was forcibly carried off from the land of the Hebrews, and even here I have done nothing to deserve being put in dungeon. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given a favorable interpretation, he said to Joseph, I too had a dream. On my head were 3 baskets of bread. In the top basket were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but the birds were eating them out of the basket on my head. This is what it means, Joseph said. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift off your head and impale your body on a pole, and the birds will eat away your flesh. Very vile. Now the 3rd day was Pharaoh's birthday, and he gave a feast for all his officials. He lifted up the heads of the chief cupbearer and the chief baker in the presence of his officials. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, so that he once again put the cup into Pharaoh's hand. But he impaled the chief baker, just as Joseph had said to them in his interpretation. The chief cupbearer, however, did not remember Joseph. He forgot him. Genesis 41, Pharaoh's dreams. When 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, sleek and fat, and they grazed among the reeds. After them 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile, and stood beside those on the river bank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek, fat cows. Then Pharaoh woke up. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then Pharaoh woke up. It had been a dream. In the morning his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians and wise men of Egypt. Pharaoh told him his dreams, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to Pharaoh, Today I am reminded of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once again with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain of the guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dreams. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them, to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impaled. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, he came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I cannot do it, Joseph replied to Pharaoh, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, In my dream I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the seeds. After them 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up the 7 fat cows that came up. But even after they ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They just looked as ugly as before. Then I woke up. In my dream, I saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads sprouted, withered and thin, and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to magicians, but none of them could explain it to me. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, The dreams of Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one and the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came up afterward are 7 years, and so are the 7 worthless heads of grain scorched by the east wind. There are 7 years of famine. And then it goes through another commentary, Egypt's 7 lean years. This is based on Genesis 41, 25 through 32. We just finished reading verse 27. So we read 25 through 27 already. From 28 through 32 will come after I read this commentary. It says this: Egypt's 7 lean years. Pharaoh's dreams involved 7 fat cows and 7 plump heads of grain, which were devoured by 7 ugly cows and 7 thin heads, respectively. Genesis 41, 1 through 7 attest to that. In Joseph's interpretation, the ugly cows and thin heads symbolize 7 years of famine. Genesis 41:25-32. The record of the 7 lean years in Egypt appears to have an antecedent in Egyptian literature. A text called The Tradition of the 7 Lean Years in Egypt is attributed to Dozier, a pharaoh of the 3rd dynasty of Egypt's Old Kingdom, circa 2650 BC. The text of this Egyptian story as it now exists came from scribes during the reign of Ptolemy the Fifth, 204 to 180 BC, a ruler of the Macedonian dynasty established by the successors of Alexander the Great. While this text is much later than the account in Genesis, it is possible that it had been copied from an earlier text. The Egyptian text recounts a letter that Dozier wrote to his overseer in Elephantine, in southern Egypt, lamenting the fact that the Nile has not come in my time for a space of 7 years. Consequently, grain was scarce, fruits were dried up, and every man robbed his companion. Imhotep, the renowned vizier of chief minister to Dozier, proceeds to tell him about the god Khnum, who resides at the birthplace of the Nile, namely Elephantine. Pharaoh Dozier then has a dream in which the god tells him that the Nile would soon pour forth for you. Thus plants would again grow and starvation would cease. The pharaoh awoke refreshed and presumably then drafted the text for his official at Elephantine. Now it has a little picture of a statue here, little bronze statue based on the story. So now going on to 28 through 32, it says this. It is just as I said to Pharaoh. God has shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. 7 years of great abundance are coming throughout the land of Egypt, but 7 years of famine will follow them. Then all the abundance in Egypt will be forgotten, and the famine will ravage the land. The abundance in the land will not be remembered, because the famine that follows it will be so severe. The reason the dream was given to Pharaoh in 2 forms is that the matter has been firmly decided by God, and God will do it soon. The Hyksos Empire. After taking control of Lower Egypt, the Hyksos established a capital at Avaris. King Kamuz of Thebes eventually broke the power of the Hyksos, and his younger brother Ahmose the First drove them from Egypt. In 1540, Ahmose began a 3-year siege of Saruhan, the Hyksos stronghold in South Palestine. At this time, Egyptian texts referred to the land of Palestine as Retenu. Now, this is a little map of that area. So you got Babylonia here, you got the Hittites here, you have Egypt here, and you have Retenu here. Those are all the lands that is being talked about in this storyline. That's the map. Now going back to the scriptures, in verse 33, it says, And now let Pharaoh look for a discerning and wise man and put him in charge of the land of Egypt. Let Pharaoh appoint commissioners over the land to take 1/5 of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 years of abundance. They should collect all the food of these good years that are coming and store up the grain under the authority of Pharaoh to be kept in the cities for food. This food should be held in reserve for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. The plan seemed good to Pharaoh and to all his officials. So Pharaoh asked them, Can we find anyone like this man, one in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, Since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your orders. Only with respect to the throne will I be greater than you. Joseph in charge of Egypt. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took a signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, Make way! Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Now it has a little picture of these carved statues in the wall made of clay. Each one represents a different pharaoh. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word no one will lift hand or foot in all Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name Zephanath-Paneah and gave him Asenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, to be his wife, and Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentifully. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored it in the cities. In each city he put the food grown in the fields surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain, like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping records because it was beyond measure. Now it has a little commentary based on politics and government. The Egyptians maintained large stone storehouses primarily for grain. We can see this in Genesis 41, verse 48. This protected them from famine and also helped stabilize prices. The granaries were often associated with temples. The ruler was regarded as divine, and the department devoted to grain was one of the most important in the fundamentally religious government of Egypt. Now let's continue in Genesis 41, verse 50. Before the years of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph by Asenath, daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh, and said, "It is because God had made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household." The second son he named Ephraim, and said, "It is because God has made me fruitful in the land of suffering." The 7 years of abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to Pharaoh for food. Then Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph and do what he tells you." When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold grain to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe throughout Egypt, and all the world came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. Genesis chapter 42. Joseph's brothers go to Egypt. When Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you keep looking at each other?" He continued, "I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us, so that we may live and not die." Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt. But Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with the others, because he was afraid that harm might come to him. So Israel's sons were among those who went to buy grain, for there was famine in the land of Canaan also. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the person who sold grain to all its people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. "Where do you come from?" he asked. "From the land of Canaan," they replied, "to buy food." Although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Then he remembered his dreams about them and said to them, "You are spies. You have come to see where our land is unprotected." "No, my lord," they answered. "Your servants have come to buy food. We are all the sons of one man. Your servants are honest men, not spies." "No," he said to them, "you have come to see where our land is unprotected." But they replied, "Your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more." Joseph said to them, "It is just as I told you. You are spies, and this is how you will be tested. As surely as Pharaoh lives, you will not leave this place unless your youngest brother come here. Send one of your number to get your brother. The rest of you will be kept in prison so that your words may be tested to see if you are telling the truth. If you are not, then as surely as Pharaoh lives, you are spies." And he put them all in custody for 3 days. On the 3rd day, Joseph said to them, "Do this and you will live, for I fear God. If you are an honest man, let one of your brothers stay here in prison, while the rest of you go and take grain back for your starving households. But you must bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified and that you may not die." This they proceeded to do. They said to one another, "Surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come on us." Reuben replied, "Didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we must give an accounting for his blood." They did not realize that Joseph could understand them, since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep, but then came back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain, to put each man's silver back in his sack, and to give them provisions for their journey. After this was done for them, they loaded their grain on their donkeys and left. At the place where they stopped for the night, one of them opened his sack to get feed for his donkey. And he saw his silver in the mouth of his sack. "My silver has been returned," he said to his brothers. "Here it is in my sack." The Their hearts sank, and they turned to each other trembling and said, "What is this that God has done to you, or done to us?" When they came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them. They said, "The man who is Lord over the land spoke harshly to us and treated us as though we were spying on the land. But we said to him, 'We are honest men. We are not spies. We were 12 brothers, son of one father. One is more, and the youngest is now with our father in Canaan.' Then the man who is Lord over the land said to us, 'This is how I will know whether you are honest men. Leave one of your brothers here with me, and take food for your starving households and go. But bring your youngest brother to me, so I will know that you are not spies, but honest men. Then I will give you your brother back to you, and you can trade in the land.' As they were emptying their sacks, there in each man's sack was his pouch of silver. Then they and their father saw the money pouches. They were frightened. Their father Jacob said to them, 'You have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now you want to take Benjamin? Everything is against me.' Then Reuben said to his father, 'You may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care, and I'll bring him back.' But Jacob said, 'My son will not go down there with you. His brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm comes to him on the journey you are taking, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in sorrow.'" Genesis 43, the second journey to Egypt. Now the famine was still severe in the land. So when they had eaten all the grain they had brought from Egypt, their father said to them, "Go back and buy us a little more food." But Judah said to him, "The man warned us solemnly, 'You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you. If you will send our brother along with us, we will go down and buy food for you. But if you will not send him, we will not go down, because the man said to us, "You will not see my face again unless your brother is with you."'" Israel asked, "Why did you bring this trouble on me by telling the men you had another brother?" They replied, "The man questioned us closely about ourselves and our family. 'Is your father still living?' he asked us. 'Do you have another brother?' We simply answered his questions. How were we to know he would say, 'Bring your brother down here'?" Then Judah said to Israel his father, "Send the boy along with me, and we will go at once, so that we and you and our children may live and not die. I myself will guarantee his safety. You can hold me personally responsible for him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, I will bear the blame before you all my life. As it is, if we had not delayed, we could have gone and returned twice." Then their father Israel said to them, "If it must be, then do this. Put some of the best products of the land in your bags, and take them down to the man as a gift: a little balm and a little money, some spices and myrrh, some pistachio nuts and almonds. Take double the amount of silver with you, for you must return the silver that was put back into the mouths of your sacks. Perhaps it was a mistake. Take your brother also, and go back to the man at once. And may God Almighty grant you mercy before the man, so that he will let your other brother and Benjamin come back with you. As for me, if I am bereaved, I am bereaved." So the men took the gifts and doubled the amount of silver, and Benjamin also. They hurried down to Egypt and presented themselves to Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, "Take these men to my house, slaughter an animal, and prepare a meal. They are to eat with me at high noon." The man did as Joseph told him, and took the men to Joseph's house. Now the men were frightened when they were taken to his house. They thought, "We were brought here because of the silver that was put back into our sacks the first time. He wants to attack us and overpower us, and seize us as slaves, and take our donkeys." So they went up to Joseph's steward and spoke to him at the entrance to the house. "We beg your pardon, our lord," they said. "We came down here the first time to buy food, but at the place where we stopped for the night, we opened our sacks, and each of us found his silver, the exact weight in the mouth of his sack. So we have brought it back with us. We also brought additional silver with us to buy food. We don't know who put our silver in our sacks." "It's all right," he said. "Don't be afraid. Your God, the God of your father, has given you treasure in your sacks. I received your silver." Then he brought Simeon out to them. The steward took the men into Joseph's house, gave them water to wash their feet, and provided fodder for their donkeys. They prepared their gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon, because they had heard that they were to eat there. When Joseph came home, they presented to him the gifts they had brought into the house, and they bowed down before him to the ground. He asked them how they were, and then he said, "How is your aged father you told me about? Is he still living?" They replied, "Your servant, our father, is still alive and well." And they bowed down, prostrating themselves before him. As he looked about and saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son, he asked, "Is this your youngest brother, the one me about. And he said, God be gracious to you, my son. Deeply moved at the sight of his brother, Joseph hurried out and looked for a place to weep. He went into his private room and wept there. After he had finished his space, he came out and, controlling himself, said, serve the food. They served him by himself, the brothers by themselves, the Egyptians who ate with him by themselves, because Egyptians could not eat with Hebrews, for that is detestable to Egyptians. The men had been seated before him in the order of their ages, from the firstborn to the youngest, and they looked at each other in astonishment. When portions were served to them from Joseph's table, Benjamin's portion was 5 times as much as anyone else's, so they feasted and drank freely with him. Marriage and family. Joseph seated his brothers in order of their age, from Genesis 43, verses 33. Rights of inheritance were almost inflexibly linked to the order of birth. In society as a whole, age was regarded as a title to respect. Contentment for one's parents or elders was a serious offense, in certain cases calling for extreme punishment. For example, Exodus 21:17 and Leviticus 19, verse 32. Now moving on into Genesis chapter 44, a silver cup and a sack. Now Joseph gave these instructions to the steward of his house. Fill the men's sacks with as much food as they can carry, and put each man's silver in the mouth of his sack. Then put my cup, the silver one, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack, along with the silver for his grain. And he did as Joseph said. Now following that portion, we are now in Genesis 44. But following that portion, we have the time capsule from 1775 to 1700 BC. In 1775 BC, Zimri Lim regains control of the Mari. 1760, Hammurabi destroys the palace at Mari. In 1741 and 1364 BC, disunited independent city-states in the region later called Assyria were found. In 1728 BC, Usher's date for the descent of Joseph into Egypt was calculated. In 1705 BC, Jacob enters Egypt based on the late Exodus in Genesis 46, verse 3. In 1700 BC, Phoenicians developed the alphabet of consonants only. Phoenicians developed the first alphabet. As morning dawned, the men were not, so we're going back to Genesis 44 and going back to the scripture. We're in verse 3 now. As morning dawned, the men were sent on their way with their donkeys. They had not gone far from the city when Joseph said to his steward, go after those men at once, and when you catch up with them, say to them, why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from and also uses for divination? This is a wicked thing you have done. When he caught up with them, he repeated these words to them. But they said to him, why does my lord say such things? Far be it from your servants to do anything like that. We even brought back to you from the land of Canaan the silver we found inside the mouths of our sacks. So why would we steal silver or gold from your master's house? If any of your servants is found to have it, he will die, and the rest of us will become my lord's slaves. Very well then, he said, let it be as you may say. Whoever is found to have it will become my slave. The rest of you will be free from blame. Each of them quickly lowered his sack to the ground and opened it. Then the steward proceeded to search, beginning with the oldest and ending with the youngest. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this, they tore their clothes. Then they all loaded their donkeys and returned to the city. Joseph was still in the house when Judah and his brothers came in, and they threw himself to the ground before him. Joseph said to them, what is this you have done? Don't you know that a man like me can find things out by divination? What can we say to my lord? Judah replied. What can we say? How can we prove our innocence? God has uncovered your servant's guilt. We are now my lord's slaves. We ourselves and the one who was found to have the cup. But Joseph said, far be it from me to do such a thing. Only the man who was found to have the cup will become my slave. The rest of you go back to your father in peace. Then Judah went up to him and said, pardon your servant, my lord. Let me speak a word to my lord. Do not be angry with your servant, though. You are equal to Pharaoh himself. My lord asked his servants, do you have a father or a brother? And we answered, we have an aged father, and there is a young son born to him in his old age. His brother is dead, and he is the only one of his mother's sons left, and his father loves him. Then you said to your servants, bring him down to me so I can see him for myself. And we said to my lord, The boy cannot leave his father. If he leaves him, his father will die. But you told your servants, unless your youngest brother comes down with you, you will not see my face again. When we went back to your servant, my father, we told him what my lord had said. Then our father said, go back and buy a little more food. But we said, we cannot go down. Only if our youngest brother is with us will we go. We cannot see the man's face unless our youngest brother is with us. Your servant, my father, said to us, you know that my wife bore me 2 sons. One of them went away from me, and I said, he has surely been torn to pieces, and I have not seen him since. If you take this one from me too, and harm comes to me, you will bring my gray head down to the grave in misery. So now if the boy is not with us, when I go back to your servant, my father, and if my father, whose life is closely bound up with the boy's life, sees that the boy isn't there, he will die. Your servants will bring the gray head of our father down to the grave in sorrow. Your servant guaranteed the boy's safety to my father. I said, if I do not bring him back to you, I will bear the blame before you, my father, all my life. Now then, please let your servant remain here as my lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? No, do not let me see the misery that would come on my father. Genesis chapter 45. Joseph makes himself known. Then Joseph could no longer control himself before all his attendants, and he cried out, have everyone leave my presence. So there was no one with Joseph when he made himself known to his brothers. And he wept so loudly that the Egyptians heard him, and Pharaoh's household heard about it. Joseph said to his brother, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified of his presence. Then Joseph said to his brother, come close to me. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. And now, do not be distressed, and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God had sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So then, it was not you who sent me here, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire household, and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says. God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me. Don't delay. You shall live in the region of Goshen and be near me. You, your children and grandchildren, your flocks and herds, and all you have. I will provide for you there, because 5 years of famine are still to come. Otherwise, you and your household and all who belong to you will become destitute. You can see for yourselves, and so can my brother Benjamin, that it is really I who am speaking to you. Tell my father about all the honor accorded me in Egypt, and about everything you have seen, and bring my father down here quickly. Then he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin and wept. And Benjamin embraced him weeping, and he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterwards his brothers talked with him. When the news reached Pharaoh's palace that Joseph's brothers had come, Pharaoh and all his officials were pleased. Pharaoh said to Joseph, tell your brothers, do this, load your animals and return to the land of Canaan, and bring your father and your families back to him. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you can enjoy the fat of the land. It has a little picture from the actual palace. Those are the pillars going up, and that's the ceiling. Going on in verse 19. You are also directed to tell them, do this, take some carts from Egypt for your children and your wives, and get your father and come. Never mind about your belongings, because the best of all Egypt will be yours. So the sons of Israel did this. Joseph gave them carts, as Pharaoh had commanded, and he also gave them provisions for their journey. To each of them he gave new clothing, but to Benjamin he gave 300 shekels of silver and 5 sets of clothes. And this is what he sent to his father: 10 donkeys loaded with the best things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain and bread and other provisions for his journey. Then he sent his brothers away, and as they were leaving, he said to them, don't quarrel on the way. So they went up out of Egypt and came to their father Jacob in the land of Canaan. They told him, Joseph is still alive. In fact, he is ruler of all Egypt. Jacob was stunned. He did not believe them. But when they told him everything Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts Joseph had sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father Jacob revived. And Israel said, I'm convinced my son Joseph is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. Genesis chapter 46. Jacob goes to Egypt. So Israel set out with all that was his. And when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. And God spoke to Israel in a vision at night and said, Jacob, Jacob. Here am I, he replied. I am God, the God of your father. He said, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again. And Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. Then Jacob left Beersheba, and Israel's sons took their father Jacob and their children and their wives in the carts that Pharaoh had sent to transport him. So Jacob and all his offspring went to Egypt, taking with them their livestock and the possessions they had acquired in Canaan. Jacob brought with him to Egypt his sons and grandsons and his daughters and granddaughters, all his offspring. These are the names of the sons of Israel, Jacob and his descendants who went to Egypt. Reuben, the firstborn of Jacob. The sons of Reuben, Hanoch, Palu, Hezron, and Carmi. The sons of Simeon, Jemuel, Jamin, Ohad, Jachin, Zohar, and Shaul, the son of a Canaanite woman. The sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. The sons of Judah, Onan, Shelah, Perez, and Zerah. But and Onan had died in the land of Canaan. The sons of Perez, Hezron, and Hamul. The sons of Issachar, Tola, Pua, Jeshub, and Shimron. The sons of Zebulun, Sered, Elon, and Jahaleel. These were the sons of Leah, born to Jacob in Padan Aram, besides his daughter Dinah. These sons and daughters of his were 33 in all. The sons of Gad, Zephon, Haggai, Shunai, Esbon, Eri, Orodi, and Irilai. The sons of Asher, Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, and Beriah. Their sister was Sarah. The sons of Beriah, Heber, and Malchiel. These were the children born to Jacob by Zilpah, whom Laban had given to his daughters Leah, 16 in all. The sons of Jacob's wife Rachel, Joseph and Benjamin. In Egypt, Manasseh and Ephraim were born to Joseph by Eshenath, daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. The sons of Benjamin, Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gera, Naaman, Ehi, Rosh, Mupim, Hupim, and Ard. These were the sons of Rachel, who were born to Jacob, 14 in all. The son of Dan, Hashim. The sons of Naphtali, Jahaziel, Guni, Jazar, and Shilem. These were the sons born to Jacob by Bilhah, when Laban had given to his daughter Rachel, 7 in all. All those who went to Egypt with Jacob, those who were his direct descendants, not counting his sons' wives, numbered 66 persons. With the 2 sons who had been born to Joseph in Egypt, the members of Jacob's family which went to Egypt were 70 in all. Now Jacob sent Judah ahead of him to Joseph to get directions to Goshen. When they arrived in the region of Goshen, Joseph had his chariot made ready and went to Goshen to meet his father Israel. As soon as Joseph appeared before him, he threw his arms around his father and wept for a long time. Israel said to Joseph, "Now I am ready to die, since I have seen for myself that you are still alive." Then Joseph said to his brothers and to his father's household, "I will go up and speak to Pharaoh and will say to him, my brothers and my father's household, who were living in the land of Canaan, have come to me. The men are shepherds. They tend livestock, and they have brought along their flocks and herds and everything they own. When Pharaoh calls you in and asks, 'What is your occupation?' you should answer, 'Your servants have tended livestock from our boyhood on, just as our fathers did.' Then you will be allowed to settle in the region of Goshen. For all shepherds are detestable to the Egyptians." Transition. Jacob enters Egypt. Jacob's journey from Canaan to Egypt is summarized in Genesis 47, verse 27. Now the Israelites settled in Egypt and increased greatly in number. This event marks the move of the Israelite people from Canaan, the promised land, to Egypt, the land of slavery. As such, it became part of Israel's basic statement of faith. Israel's faith started with the retelling of her historical origins, often beginning with Jacob's descent to Egypt. For instance, the ritual retelling of Deuteronomy 26, verse 5 through 9 begins, "My father was a wandering Aramean, and he went down into Egypt." Jacob was 130 years old when he entered Egypt, as Genesis 47:9 states. This figure is sometimes used to relate Abraham to the Israelite sojourn in Egypt. Abraham fathered Isaac when he was 100 years old in Genesis 21, verse 5. Isaac fathered Jacob 60 years later in Genesis 25, verse 26. Adding the numbers makes a passing of 290 years between Abraham's birth and this entry into Egypt. 100 plus 60 plus 130 equals 290. Now, continuing on, Genesis 47, 1 through 50, 26 is the last portion, and this is the final part of Genesis. Genesis 47. Joseph went and told Pharaoh, "My father and brothers with their flocks and herds and everything they own have come from the land of Canaan and are now in Goshen." He chose 5 of his brothers and presented them before Pharaoh. Pharaoh asked the brothers, "What is your occupation?" "Your servants are shepherds," they replied to Pharaoh, "just as our fathers were." They also said to him, "We have come to live here for a while, because the famine is severe in Canaan, and your servants' flocks have no pasture. So now please let your servants settle in Goshen." Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Your father and your brothers have come to you, and the land of Egypt is before you. Settle your father and your brothers in the best part of the land. Let them live in Goshen, and if you know of any among them with special ability, put them in charge of my own livestock." Then Joseph brought his father Jacob in and presented him before Pharaoh. After Jacob blessed Pharaoh, Pharaoh asked him, "How old are you?" Blessed are the blessed. This is based on Genesis 47, 7 and 10. Bestowing a blessing on another was a common act in the ancient Near East. Inherent in the blessings process was the assumption by both parties that the one doing the blessing was superior to the one being blessed. Such superiority arose from a relationship to God, who was considered the source of the blessing. God occasionally gave a blessing directly, as Genesis 2:3 shows and 32:26 shows. To pronounce a blessing was not thought of as merely a ceremonial event. Rather, the pronouncement was seen as actually conferring a specific change in status. Since the name and power of God was used, the blessing once given could not be retracted, even if bestowed by deceit. Once Isaac mistakenly pronounced the blessing of the firstborn son upon Jacob, his younger son, Genesis 27, 27 through 29, he could not reverse the action in order to bless Esau, his firstborn, based on Genesis 27, 33 through 37. A subordinate could also bless years later. Jacob, a foreigner in Egypt, blessed the Pharaoh of Egypt. Since many died at a young age, old age was a sign that God's power resided with the one having a long life. Thus Jacob, an old man, was superior to the younger Pharaoh, who could benefit from Jacob's blessing. Genesis 47, 7 and 10. Sometimes the Bible literally describes humans as blessing God. For example, Psalm 34, 1, 115, 17, and 18. In some versions, the NIV uses other terms. In these cases, blessing God likely conveys the idea of giving all that a human can rightfully give to God: praise. And so, continuing on with Genesis 47, I'm going to end with this. "And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the years of my pilgrimage are 130. My years have been few and difficult, and they do not equal the years of the pilgrimage of my fathers." Then Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from his presence. So Joseph settled his father and his brothers in Egypt and gave them property in the best part of the land, the district of Ramses, as Pharaoh directed. Joseph also provided his father and his brothers and all his father's household with food according to the number of their children. And that's where I'm going to end it here with this live stream. And so I'm going to end with a prayer, and then I'll see you tomorrow. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for the blessings. Thank you for dying on the cross for our sins. Lord, I just want to thank you for allowing these people, if it's just one or if it's hundreds, to hear your message and to hear it in its biblical context, in its historical context. Lord, I pray that they got something out of this and that they learned something. And I pray that this just lays a seed in their heart, that if they're not believers, that they'll just start to begin to think about the truth and validity of the Bible. And if they are believers, that it'll help strengthen and commend their faith for them. And I pray that no matter what happens, that this adds value to their lives. And it's on your precious, holy, and powerful name that I pray. Amen. I hope you